games, meets, tournaments, and other events. As part of this webinar, we're going to be starting with some very basic ideas behind creating those events, and then we'll get into some advanced tools such as importing multiple events at once, and we'll also open it up for any kind of questions that we can help you out with your accounts. So once again, I'd like to thank everyone for attending, especially those from the state of Ohio. We're happy to kind of to get involved with you in training on this feature, and we'll go ahead and get started. A couple of items that we'll cover first. We will be covering some of the key differences and recommended best practices of how to differentiate between games, meets, and tournaments. So if you do have any questions about those, please feel free to post those in the questions box on your webinar toolbar. So to go ahead and get started, right now we are logged into my test account in ArbiterGame, and we can go ahead and create games. You'll notice that the first page that we are on here is our schedule tab. This is the tab that you'll be spending most of your time in as an administrative staff member for your ArbiterGame account. Here we have posted just about everything that pertains to your schedule. We have a simple calendar over here on the left to be able to jump to specific days, as well as some simple filtering options here as well, and an advanced filter tab, which we'll go into just a little bit later today. This main section right here will be where you will see a list view of all of the events that you have coming up. So let's go ahead and get a couple of items posted in there. So as a key note for best practices here, in the best possible situation, it's recommended that you are only adding scheduled events for your home events, the events that will take place at your school sites or events that you will host as a school. The reason why we recommend this is it allows for better collaboration between ArbiterGame users, between athletic departments of various schools. In the best case scenario, both you and your opponent have ArbiterGame accounts, and so both have the ability to manage and be responsible for your own scheduled games. So in this tutorial, we are going to be covering how to put in your home games. So to go ahead and get started, you'll notice in the upper right-hand corner there's an Add New box. And if you click on it, it will bring up a menu where you can select the kind of event that you want to create. Really quickly, as an example, a game is your typical head-to-head competition between two opponents. And of course, as a practice, it's just an event for your team that you can post on the schedule. And a meet is similar to a game in that it is one single event, except in this case there are multiple opponents participating, 3 or more opponents who are participating in one singular event. And then a tournament would be multiple head-to-head events between 2 opponents. So a way to think about it is common meets are like your cross-country track events, your swim meets, gymnastic meets, wrestling quads or tries, as well as volleyball tries and quads. You can think of it as where it's one event happening at one simultaneous time, or you can also think of it in terms of how many crews of referees that you need. If you only need one referee crew who is managing this or refereeing this one event, then it's most likely a meet. And then you do have an option to do other types of events. These are more of your miscellaneous events. These are classes that you're hosting at night at your school. These are assemblies that you want to notify parents about. These are pep rallies and various other kinds of events. So we'll go ahead and get started with just a basic simple game here. If you click on the New Game button here, it's going to pull up the Create Game tab. And there's a couple of things to note here. At the very top, you have what's called a common name. More often, this is used on meets when you give a name like of a specific invitation, such as the Country Club Classic or or some other kind of sponsored meet. If you're doing it for a single game, a good example, like we have posted below, is that it's a homecoming game that you're putting in. And then down below is where this section down below is where we get into the more specific and key details of the game. So first off, under matchup, I want to select the team for the sport and level that I am creating this event. So for example, we'll go ahead and create a football game this week. So I'm going to scroll down the list until I get to my boys varsity football team. And you'll notice that a couple of things did immediately change. First, I put in a default site, and then I can select the sub-site where the field, what field the game will be played at. But before we do that, on my matchup, I also want to select who my opponent is. And so if I click on the drop-down here, I can select from a list of opponents that I have on my account. If you don't see an opponent listed on this list, what that most likely means is that you haven't added that opponent to your account yet. And you can do that by clicking on your Opponents tab and following instructions there to add an opponent to your account. But in this case, I do see an opponent that I'm planning to compete against. So I'm just going to select them from the list, and then I'm going to move forward. There is an option here, really quick, for cross-level. You will almost never use this, but cross-level would mean that this is an event where two teams from separate sports and levels are playing. For example, my varsity team might be playing a friendly with the junior varsity team of one of my opponents, or vice versa. Those are rare and few and far between for when you use them, but that's what this checkbox is here for. Since this is a full-on varsity school-sanctioned game, I'm not going to use that. I'm going to leave that unchecked. So coming down below, we can now get into the nitty-gritty details of this event. First, we want to say under the Where section, this is a home game, so I'm going to leave home selected. If I were to mark this as an away game, and I click on the away, it will change the site to the default for my opponent. And I can select under the sub-site list some various sub-sites here. This is a test account, so we have a couple of test sub-sites here, but we could select the football field. However, this is a home game because it's highly recommended that I let Brighton have their chance to put in their schedule, and I wouldn't be putting in away games unless my opponent wasn't using ArbiterGame. So this is a home game, and I'm going to select my default site. It's already put up here, and I'm going to list the sub-site of where we're playing. And we're just going to play a field of one. Then I can put in the when information. So we'll say I was a little bit late in getting this on the schedule, so we'll say it's a game for this Friday night at 7 o'clock. And this game is set to run for 3.5 hours. And then over here on the right, there's a couple of additional pieces of info that's important. Every ArbiterGame account is also connected to our Arbiter Live platform, which allows students and parents to go online and to see information about their teams that they wish to follow and subscribe to. So as far as publishing this game, I can tell this to publish this game information to Arbiter Live so that my parents can see it. Then I can also list what kind of a game type this is. If this is a league game, non-league, if it's a friendly scrimmage, or if it's part of a tournament. This is a regular season game, so I'm going to call it a league game. Then we also have here a fairly new feature for a participation fee. Many teams, when they schedule certain games against each other, there might be a participation fee that's involved. That either the host school pays to the opponent for coming and playing at their game, or that the opponent pays to the school for traveling to their home site. So for here, we'll just put in a simple participation fee, $500, and we'll say that the party paying the fee is my opponent. Then down below we have here a breach fee, which is a little bit different. This would be for if a team cancels beyond a pre-contracted time. this would be a fee that would be paid by the opponent for a breach of contract. By default, it's going to load what the participation fee is, but I am able to change that as needed. And then finally, we have another option here for to bypass the smart scheduler. This is a feature that we will discuss in a separate webinar, but essentially the smart scheduler is a tool where you can set up rules for your teams to say basically, whenever I create a home game for my boys varsity team at 7 o'clock, you can also tell the system to create additional games for other teams. For example, you can tell it to create a JV game 3 hours earlier. Once again, we'll cover that in better detail on a later webinar, but for now, I'm going to tell it to bypass the smart scheduler and to not pay attention to any of that. We also have additional sections to add game notes, which is simply an internal note for any ArbiterGame staff at this school to see additional notes about the game. And there is also a contract addendum. For the contract addendum is to add any additional language outside of the pre-drafted contract that your school has. So if there is some additional contract that has been agreed to, for example, opposing team provides boundary cones and electronic equipment, or if there is an additional fee, you can put in a note here, and it will save this information to the contract details. Below this, we have additional sections for facility requests and for transportation requests. We will cover these items in a separate webinar, but more or less the facility information is used to send information to your facility manager to know when to set up the field, when to clean it up afterwards, and other details. The same goes for the transportation request. If you are dealing with an away game or a game that is played at a satellite site off of school campus, you can use the transportation to set up and arrange for how to transport your students to the game. You'll see that we do integrate with School Dude, and so as we've said, we will cover this topic in greater detail in a subsequent webinar. Finally, below this game, we can indicate the officiating needs for this game. ArbiterGame is connected to our Arbiter 1 platform, which is used by referees and their assigners to handle scheduling for games. Based on my team's settings and defaults, you can indicate if officials are required for this game, or if they are assigned by school, or if I have already connected my team to an Arbiter 1 assigner, there would be a third option to select a specific Arbiter 1 assigner. So if you do not see an option for your team to use an Arbiter 1 assigner, and yet you've already contracted with an assigner to handle this game, you would want to go to your team and edit that information there. So for right now, I'm going to go ahead and say that there are no officials required for this game, and I'm going to click on this Create Game button. If I'm entering multiple games, I can also hit Create Game and New, and it will save this game and refresh this page with blank information to put in a new game. In fact, I'll just click on this button to show you what that looks like. So if I hit Create Game and New, I'll see this banner saying that the information has been saved, and then I can create information against another opponent. And I can go down and I can save this game information. So returning back to the schedule page, you'll see on the calendar default we're still looking at today's date, and so there aren't any games scheduled. But you'll notice over on the left, for the end of the week for this Friday, the calendar date is highlighted in blue, indicating that there is an event of some sort for this game. So I can click on that, and it will pull up the game that we just created on the schedule. And there's a couple of things to note here first. Over on the on the right-hand side, you'll see these 5 boxes for different various needs for the game. This first box is for the contract items, and it will pull up information all about the contract for this game. So you'll notice that under the contract addendum, we have the note about the opposing team provides boundary cones and electronic equipment. We have the participation fee and the breach fee. There are no notes. And then we also have a game ID, which we use in ArbiterGame so that you can search for the game at a future time. You'll also notice a link here to view a contract. You can click on that, and it will pull up a pop-up screen, and you can download that contract as a PDF. So once again, with that information, you'll also notice this contract icon here is currently colored yellow. The reason why is because I created the game as the home team, the contract status is automatically accepted. You'll also see here the opponent's status, and you'll see that my opponent has not yet accepted the contract. Now, in my specific district on this account, I do have permission by the opponent as needed to accept the contract on the opponent's behalf. There are many states where this is not a permission that is granted to schools. So if you are in a state that does not allow you to accept contracts for opponents, for example, in the state of Ohio, that is not permitted, you'll want to make sure that you go to your Settings tab on your ArbiterGame account and go to your Preferences sub-tab and make sure that you select the permission to prevent opponents from accepting my game contracts. Similarly, you can also prevent opponents from creating teams as well. When you've checked that box, you can go ahead and save preferences, and you can return back to your schedule page. So coming back to this game, we do have other boxes. This box here is for officials, and because we've said that no officials are required for this game, this box is blank. We also have a box for event workers, which you can assign and which we have covered in a different webinar, as well as boxes for facility management and for transportation. Once again, we will cover all of these items in separate webinars, and so for more information on those, please refer to those webinars. So now that we've created one single game, we do have a couple of tools to help pull in multiple games, and that is through our importer tool. So if once again you go to the green button in the upper right-hand corner for adding new games, you can click on that, and you'll see down at the bottom of the list there is an Import Games feature. So I'd like to show you how this works a little bit because it can save time and just kind of make the whole process easier for putting in an entire season schedule. So if you click on that button, it's going to bring up this Import Games page. We do have a brief message up here with instructions on how to upload this information, but I'm going to go ahead and walk you through it. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that you are using our ArbiterGame import template. So if you don't already have a template, I recommend you click on this link right here to download a new template, and it's going to download a spreadsheet that you can open up. I'm going to get that loaded here. So this right here is a blank game template, and there's a couple of pieces of information here. We have preloaded every one of these columns for the data that you need to or that you can upload. You do not want to delete any column. I'd recommend that if there's a column that is not important for you to upload, that you simply just leave that blank as you're filling out this information. You'll also notice that there are a couple of sheets at the bottom. This is all for internal template use to make sure the information is all correct. Do not delete any of those as well. So I'll go ahead and walk through how some of this is created. First, I'm going to go ahead and pull up an already created version of the template with a schedule, just kind of save time here and use the magic of TV here. So on this template, a couple of things I want to point out. You'll notice that at the column headers, there are these tabs here that indicate that there is a comment here. These are tooltips that we put in to help out with the creation of these fields that you're putting in. So date is a required field, and it needs to follow the format of month, month, day, day, and year, year. You cannot use TBA dates. Same goes, you've got information for the time, that is also required, as is the sport, or the team, which indicates the sport and the level, and home and away. A quick note here, you can certainly manually type in the team name. However, if there is any kind of discrepancy between what you type in and how the team is created in ArbiterGame, it will not import. So instead, what we recommend is that if you click on the cell, you'll see over on the right side of the cell a pull-down menu with all of the various teams that your account has preloaded. So you can go through and you can find the team that you want to put in. In this case, I've put in my basketball varsity boys team. So I've selected from that list, and I've copied them through the other cells for the schedule that I'm making. I'm also indicating that these are all home teams. And then on the opponent column, I've once again clicked on the pull-down menu and selected the team that I want to use. Once again, if there's any kind of a spelling error or a discrepancy, for example, an extra space or 2 dashes or simply missing a letter, it will not be recognized by the importer tool, and it will not be imported on your account. So we always recommend that you use the pre-selected, pre-populated options. Next, I can indicate the site, once again, using the pull-down menu. I can say my home site, which is Box Elder High School, and the gym, which is where my basketball team plays. And then the following columns are not required, but I can indicate if transportation is required for the game. I can select yes or no. Or if there is a facility request required, yes or no. I'm going to say that none of these are required in this case, so I'm going to leave them at no. And then I can say whether these games are to be scheduled by an Arbiter1 assigner, or if I am in charge of the assigning. In this case, my basketball team, I have already set a default assigner, so I have the option of using an Arbiter1 assigner. If you have not set a default assigner, these games will not import. So with this information, I'm going to go ahead and save this file. And I'm going to give it, the name that this is my boys varsity basketball schedule. But it's also important that I save it in the format of Excel 97 to 2003 workbook. This is the same. Oops. This is the same format that the template is downloaded on your computer, and you want to make sure that you still use this. This is the format that's recognized by our importer. If you use a different format, it most likely will not be recognized, and your import will not go through. I'm going to go ahead and save that information. And then I'm going to return back to my importer tool. And I'm going to select the file from my computer. So I've got the file name loaded here. And I can then click on this upload button. Now what will happen is it's going to take a moment to upload the games, and when it's finished, I'll get this message here saying that it successfully uploaded 5 games and that I had 0 failures. If I did have any failed records, it would list the date, time, team, and opponent information down below, so I could see what information wasn't entered right on the spreadsheet. Similarly, I can also use the export tool to download a similar spreadsheet of those games so that I can work with and fix that game information. So that is the import tool, and that is useful for creating head-to-head game events, single game events. So what we'll do now is we'll move forward to the different types of events that can be created. And so we're going to talk now about meets and tournaments. So once again, for meets, meets should be considered as single events where multiple teams are participating, usually where it is more focused on the individual student athletes competing, and there is usually one crew of officials or staff administrating the game. So examples of this are wrestling meets, cross-country invitationals, swim meets, and various other single event, single location events. Golf tournaments are also considered under the umbrella of meets. So to go ahead and create a meet, I'm going to click on the Add Game button, and I'm going to select New Meet. Once again, just like with almost identical to the games page, there's a section for me to put in a common name. So we'll make a we'll just use the name of a tournament that's common here in Utah. We'll call it the Round Ball Ruckus. This was an old recreational basketball tournament. I'm going to adopt that as the name for my meet here. Not that it has anything to do with the sport that I'm going to select here, but we're going to go ahead and just say that this is for a volleyball meet, like a try or a quad. So what I want to do is I want to select my first opponent for this. So I'll select the first school, and you'll notice that under the meet there is now an Add More Opponents option. So I can click on that, and I can select another opponent to invite. And then something to pay attention to here is immediately to the left it wants me to select the sport and level for this opponent. Even though this is a girls varsity volleyball game, this will pre-populate at the top of the list of available levels that can be used in an ArbiterGame event. You want to make sure that you select the appropriate level here when you are creating this meet. This is a girls varsity volleyball meet, so I'm going to make sure that I select varsity here. And I'm going to add that opponent to the game. Then I'm going to add 2 more opponents. Once again, making sure I select the appropriate level. And then if I need to remove a team, I can always click on the red remove button to shorten that list. So down below, I can say this is a home event taking place at my school. We'll say that this is taking place in the auxiliary gym. We'll set this for this Thursday, and we'll have it start at 6 p.m. And we'll say that it goes for 2.5 hours. I definitely want to publish this to Arbiter Live. This is a regular league meet. There's, in this case, there is a participation fee being paid by the opponents. We'll just say $150. But there is no breach fee in this case. So we'll just set that at 0. I don't have any facility request information or transportation requests. And in this case, I'll say that the officials in this case are assigned by me as the host school. And we'll say that we have 4 officials that are needed. So I'm going to go ahead and create this meet. And it will bring us back to the schedule page. And I can go to this Thursday, and I can see that we have this meet created. Again, we have a contract icon with information about participation fees and contract status. Once again, you'll notice Brighton High School and Canyon View do allow me to accept the contracts for them as opponents. but Cross Creek does not. So I can accept these contracts, but this contract icon will not turn green to indicate that everyone has accepted the contract until Cross Creek accepts the contract. So it's now my responsibility as the host school to contact Cross Creek and make sure that they accept the contract. So that is how you create a meet. Actually, I'll show you how to edit any information. If there is any information that needs to be changed, I can just click on the event, and it will bring me back to the game information, so I can change any information as needed and save it. This will trigger a game change notification. We are going to be covering that in our very next webinar, which will be this Thursday. So if you have any questions about how you might need to change the game information, whether it's the game status or something else, please make sure that you attend our next webinar. Okay, so moving on, we do have our last event to consider, which is creating a tournament. So once again, the idea behind the tournament is going to be, this is multiple events with multiple different officiating crews and multiple teams competing in head-to-head matches. You could say meets focus more on competition between individual student athletes. Tournaments are competitions between individual teams. So once again, we'll come to the Add New button, and we'll click on the New Tournament button. So we'll create a basketball tournament. So we'll say Winter Basketball Classic. And we'll designate who is the host of this tournament. Once again, best practice is that the home team or the host team should be the ones in charge of creating these events. So I'm going to say that I am the host entity and not any one of my opponents. I'll indicate a start date. We'll say that this is a 3-day tournament. So we'll just go in December, and we will just say Thursday through Saturday. And we'll start Thursday at 5 p.m. And the end date will be Saturday at, say, 2 p.m. We'll say the sport is basketball, and we'll say boys basketball at this point. Give it a chance to load some information. And then we'll select that it is varsity. And we'll say that this tournament does require an Arbiter 1 assigner for officials. It'll then bring up this option for me to select an available assigning group. I do have an assigner in a group. The name of this assigning group is BSU Football, but they have, in this case, we're going to say that they've also expanded their business contract to allow for basketball assigning. And we'll say that they do basketball tournament assigning. This matches with levels that they have created in their Arbiter 1 account. So you should also be able to see, you could potentially see that they have specific levels for varsity and JV and so forth. I do want to publish this tournament on Arbiter Live, so I'm going to select yes. And participation fee, we'll just say, is $25. So then I'm going to go ahead and create the tournament. And it's going to pull up some additional information here. I do have an option to attach a file, such as a flyer or other piece of information, maybe a contract for your opponents to see, some sort of other special documentation. I can then say what sites that I want this tournament to take place at. Since I am the host school, I'm going to say that it's all taking place at my school. And we're going to say that they can take place in the gym, I can add that site. And we'll just say that for overflow reasons, we can also put it in our auxiliary gym. And then next we can say who are the teams that are participating in the opponent. Since I'm the host, it's already put my team in, and I can add additional teams to be invited. So I click on the Add Teams button, and this pop-up screen will give me some possible opponents. Because this is basketball and there can be numerous teams, I may have some teams that have squads. For example, Canyon View apparently is allowed to have 3 varsity squads. So I'll select Brighton, Canyon View, the A and B teams, Carbon High School, and Cross Creek's A squad. So we now have all of the opponents here. They have contracts. Once again, if they've given me permission to, I can accept a contract on their behalf. Although, if that's not permitted in your state, please allow your opponents the opportunity to accept the contract for themselves. Now that I've got the teams, I can actually schedule specific games for the tournament. So if I click on the Add Games, it's going to bring up this Add Games tool, which will help me automatically create multiple games. So we'll say on the first day, on Thursday, we'll say we want to create 3 games. We'll say 3 games at the gym. And the time of the first game, since this is on Thursday, first game is at 5. The games last for an hour. And there is a half-hour break between the games. So I'm going to save that information. And it's going to go through and create those 3 games to the tournament. So I now have a game at 5, 6:30, and 8. It will have automatically created these games, sent the information to my assigner so that he can begin the process of adding officials. And since I'm the host, it will give me the option to add event workers and manage the facility as needed. If I need to add additional games for additional days, I can also do so. For the Friday night game, and I can then save that information. So now I have the beginnings of a tournament being set up here. And so I can now save the tournament. And I can come over on my calendar to that tournament date, and I can see that information for that game. Now, as of right now, all I can see right here is the overall tournament information, and that's because if I click on the tournament and return to the games, I haven't set who any of the opponents are on the game yet. So if I want to add opponents to the game, I can click on this edit pencil here, and I can select the home team, and I can select an away team and save the changes. Then I can come to the following game, and I can select the next team and their opponent, and also select the third game. Save those changes. And then if I return to the schedule page, I can now see that information on the screen here. So that's the general gist of tournaments. And like I said, I can always come back and edit the information as needed. and then manage my tournaments with anything else that's needed. So that is the general gist of adding games, tournaments, and meets to your ArbiterGame account. So we'll go ahead and start ending. We'll end the webinar at this point as far as the presentation portion. We'll go ahead and open it up to our Q&A and answer any kind of questions that you might have about this event.